Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and today we're going to be examining the movie trailer, the Napoleon movie trailer. That's I think it's coming out in December or something like that, or November maybe. And with me today, I have AI Shire Tori. Welcome to the show. Your YouTube channel is AI Shire Tori, and you can find him on on Twitter as well. And I'll have both of those links in the description. Welcome. How are you doing today, AI?
Great, thank you. I've been watching tennis today. I've been, catching up with my sort of Napoleon knowledge and, looking at the trailer today. I'm quite excited to do because I want to see, I've looked at it, but looking at certain aspects, see if it's accurate, if it's not accurate, and how are they, and you get a glimpse of Napoleon, but also other characters, and see how they're depicted in this. Uh, so yeah, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Great. Rupert, or August, I have as well. You can find him also on his YouTube channel, Rupert August, and on Twitter. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, Rupert?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. Okay, so we're also going to be talking about sort of how Napoleon relates to our time that we're living in right now, and so that's going to be after we watch the trailer. But let's get into it.
No doubt you'll send the chaos in the streets. We must make an example, or France will fall.
What would you do if this assignment of defense was transferred to you?
I promise you brilliant successes. Everyone around here.
What is this costume you have on?
This is my uniform.
Everyone's so near.
I led the French victory at Toulon.
What is your name?
Napoleon.
As the course of my life just changed. Napoleon.
I'm destined for greatness. But those in power will only see me as a sword.
I suggest you take the throne
As a king.
Holding on.
Shall we vote?
This vermin has held the world hostage with his egotism and his lack of simple good manners.
You think you're great. You are just a tiny little brute. There's nothing without me.
All of Europe is uniting forces against me.
What's the outcome of this if you don't succeed?
Your Majesty, we are discovered. Good.
It's a trap!
I'm the first to admit when I make a mistake. I simply never do.
Okay, so that's the trailer. I'd love to get your guys' sort of just reactions to it. So AI, what do you think about just rewatching it?
I just noticed that I didn't even notice this before, but it appears that Napoleon fires the cannons at the pyramids and strikes the pyramids. Assuming this is the Battle of the Pyramids, of course. Well, it didn't take place at the the base of the pyramids. In fact, it was miles away. Yeah, I mean that one was. I mean, yeah, that one does stand out to me actually looking at it now. Yeah, I mean overall, well, let's start with it. I believe that's Marie Antoinette at her execution at the beginning. I mean, I'm just assuming. I don't know if it is, if that's meant to be. It could be anybody, but I think that's what they sort of getting at there. I don't believe he was present. I don't even believe he was in France at the time. I think he was in Corsica. It's hard to tell because he spent about 32 months back in Corsica during that period after the storming of the Bastille and then the ultimate arrest of the king and queen. And he would go back and forth between times there. I think on the third time he actually did technically go AWOL. So I have a feeling they're going to have him quite very present at events in Paris where he wasn't earlier on. I mean, during that period of the revolution, he was very much active on Corsica, which makes sense because there was a great deal of change because of the regime, the old regime going out, a new regime coming in. I believe his brother Joseph was made mayor of is it Accio? Accio, the family local town of Corsica. So yeah, and that's just my initial thoughts thinking about it. Is that there's they're sort of giving him sort of sort of inserting him into sort of a time and place where he wasn't really present. I personally, I think the actual him and Corsica probably be more of an interesting story, to be honest, because you see the dynamic between the revolutionary government and the Corsican nationalists, and of course his hero and someone who would become quite critical of him, which was a chap called Paolo, who was a freedom fighter. He ended up exiled to Britain and eventually came back and there was a rift between the Bonaparte family and Paolo. So but I mean overall and to be honest, I don't really have that high hopes for the film looking at it, if I'm absolutely honest, because I don't think I think that there is a chance there they could actually tell a really compelling and interesting story of not just Napoleon but his wider family. And again you have I'm not seeing much of Joseph, and Joseph was very present. His older brother was very present in Napoleon in his political life, and of course when he during the coup, when he removed the directorate. So yeah, I mean that's my sort of opinion, my initial opinion on it anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Rupert. What are you thinking, just based on rewatching it? I imagine you've watched it a few times by now. So what stands out this time?
Yeah, I think I sort of pick up on a new thing just about every time that I watch it. But the thing that I got this time that I thought was most interesting was they talked about Napoleon being the one that is sort of stopping France from collapsing. Which, I mean, I guess that line might be taken out of context, but when they pair it against the events of, what was it, 13 Vendémiaire, when he grape-shotted royalist Parisians, and it's seen as one of the kind of key moments in his ascension. And I think to add on that kind of is one of the major things that demonstrates his Jacobin credentials, which have been very willfully sort of swept under the rug. The idea that the royalists are less representative of France than the Jacobins implicitly is is something that's quite interesting. And if that comes out as a wider theme, which I can certainly imagine it being, yeah, I mean it comes across very much as a kind of a propaganda piece in favor of Napoleon, despite the events being 200 years out of date.
Yeah, I almost think that they might not even talk about the people he grape shots as being royalists. I don't know if they'll even deal with that. It seems I don't know, slightly counter narrative in a lot of ways.
Well, they've already sort of demonstrated. I mean, to me, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it does seem that he's trying to sort of. They're trying to portray him as being above all of the politicking and all the bloodshed and all the events, and he's just the figure that is trying to fight for France and getting away from all of the actual sort of dirty factionalism that's happening at the time. To kind of, I mean, again, it helps to rehabilitate him as a figure, but his first claims to fame come from being patronized by Robespierre. So he is not a figure that could be in any way divorced from the events of the Terror and the Committee of Public Safety and all those guys. So even if he was not actually present, I'm not actually sure, to go back to that point, whether he was present at the execution of what's her name?
Marie Antoinette.
Marie Antoinette. That's it. Sorry, I had Maria Theresa in my mind for some reason. Even if he wasn't actually present, it's kind of like I don't know. It would be a statement of sorts for him to be there, sort of representatively. But if that were the case, he would be in favor, because that's that's what he's in favor of. That's the movement that he's representing, and he's deliberately rubbing shoulders with a lot of the people who are carrying this out most enthusiastically.
It does seem that it's a very common trope for people to say that someone is above political squabbles, yet they tend to be ruthless against a certain side. They usually definitely pick a side. AI, what do you think about that?
Well, just to tag on that, I mean, there's a couple of other bits that I noticed that are sort of relevant to that, because there was the line where he's being invited, essentially, invited to take power, and he's doing so seemingly fairly reluctantly, which is not really particularly representative if you look at his politicking moves that have gotten to that point. So he tries to successfully bows out of a posting which would have been very domestically unpopular in the Vendée, because he doesn't want to have what is essentially just the wholesale slaughter of Frenchmen on his hands. And there was another point that I can't remember, but basically he at multiple times tries to sort of separate himself basically from unpopular elements of French politics at the time, despite very clearly and very forthrightly standing on the side of the Jacobins.
Yeah, it's hard for them to do this kind of politicking, I think, in movies like these. I think the people only do the type of politicking in a TV show in that format. It seems like a difficult format to be so intricate.
Well, it's a particular kind of narrative, and it's one that's very sort of glorifying to Napoleon personally. So in that sense, you can sort of sympathize from a movie making standpoint, in that it perhaps makes for a better story that is centered around the figure of Napoleon himself. Whereas he comes off as a much more grimy figure and manipulative figure if you include all of the things like how maybe they will, about how he abandoned all of his troops in Alexandria to go and in Egypt to go and rush back to France and secure his domestic political situation there.
Indeed. What are you thinking?
No, I mean, correct. I mean, the thing is, when he was on Corsica, he did enforce all aspects of the revolutionary government, the confiscation of church properties, the enforcement of the cult of supreme being, all aspects of the revolution. He was very much, it was well documented at the time that he was very much in favor. I think it wasn't his brother Joseph, it was one of the other I can't remember which brother it was of his, but what was a very, very zealot Jacobin. So it was very much within the family. I know Joseph was. He was elected. He was mayor. So he was very much, yes, as Rupert said, he was he was very much in that faction. And it's one of the reasons I think he got, because he was, he did have extended absent of leave to remain on Corsica. Now the question is that because events going on in France, he tried to avoid, and he wanted to be on Corsica, like home ground, safe territory. He knows that he can control what's going on there. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of Napoleon, I guess you say, apologists or something that make the claim that he did duck out of events in Paris at certain points, but I do think overall he did support the causes. I think though I think what the film might demonstrate, I think they're going to basically show him being almost a bit like Stalin in some ways, that he's just going he won't I don't think they're going to show him as a ideologue to the revolution, but I guess he's going to be shown as more of like a person with great intrigue. He will just sort of go with the currents and the sort of will of the times. And I think that probably will do a disservice, because he did read, he read extensively Rousseau and all these other Enlightenment thinkers at the time. So he definitely was a person of the revolution. But I mean, he also had a great fascination of history. So he Alexander, Frederick the Great, and of course Caesar, particularly Caesar, which did inform his inform his worldview from a very young age, and the military, and also how one runs an army.
So there's this sort of mentality or this concept, and I think Napoleon did this when he rose to power. But does he truly embody the revolution? He seems to definitely have a lot of agreements with the revolution, but is he sort of the embodiment? Is he a fully creation of the revolution?
No, he's the backstop of the revolution, because he's willing to make slight compromises along the way that will give him the breathing room to be able to carry out the bits that he considers more immediately important, and to be able to drive the wedge in so far that it will achieve everything that he wants in due time. I think in that sense, comparing him to Stalin is very valid, because incidentally, both of them were decided at certain points to take a more conciliatory stance towards the church, notably after it had also been partially dismantled already, which was quite helpful. In the sense of who would be the most pure representative of what the revolution represented, I think someone like a Robespierre does do a very good job with all of his assorted, strange idealistic ideas, and his neuroses, and all the paranoia and all the fear and all that kind of thing that goes alongside it. I think that makes Robespierre the best figure for that kind of thing. But Napoleon is, again, the kind of figure who's able to take those ideas and make them temporarily palatable enough that he can force through some of what is desired by the revolutionaries.
Yeah, I mean, Robespierre in many ways is like it's like your Jeremy Corbyn or your Bernie Sanders. He complete ideologue, and the problem is just incapable of governing. But you could take some ideas from it, which may or may not, or may work in theory. And I think that's what Napoleon did. And of course, the obvious case is that his view on republicanism. I mean, he did do like a complete 180 turn on it. So so yeah. But then again, I mean, I was saying to
actually, I'd contest that just quickly. I don't think he did 180 on republicanism. He just carried everything through, much more personally, rather than doing it via some like much more pure representation of what the Rousseauian idea would be. I mean, in the sense that you can have one figure that is representing the ideals of the revolution, rather than carrying it through into some kind of democratic form. Like that's completely consistent. You can still have all of the same ideas be forced through by one man autocratically, as opposed to doing it via popular consent, via whatever constitutional method you decide.
Well, I mean, the republicanism that was proposed by the revolution, I do think that he was very much enamored by the Roman sort of concept, and that's where it comes into his because very much he was quite consistent that he very much in favor of military dictatorship, so like a Caesar-like figure, or that sort of like a Roman style governance. I I mean, I would also. Sorry, go ahead.
But the actual content of his policies is completely in line with a lot of the Jacobin ideals, and you can even carry that through to Napoleon III as well. Same sort of idea.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you have things like slavery and everything. Certain rights of rights of man, that sort of stuff. It was overturned because not practical at the time. I mean, I would say though that I do think I do think he adhered to in some funny way, and I know it sounds odd, but he did adhere to the Catholic Church. I mean, I do purely for political, for the just the sort of realpolitik point of view in his coronation, because he didn't really need the Pope there, especially because it crowning himself and everything. But it was you have to look at the reason why. Well, why was the Pope present? Why did he kidnap the Pope? But why was that necessary for him to have the Pope present? And I do think your standard revolutionary Jacobin would probably have they'd have the point of view of why would you have him there? There's no reason for that, because we're governed by reason. We don't need the superstitious element, or the sort of church, the historical relationship of the church to be present. And then for me, that's always been quite an interesting thing with Napoleon, that I always thought, because even though he has, especially when he was younger, very hostile to the church, and his attitudes towards it has always been contested. Though I don't believe that he was. I don't. He wasn't obviously a church man himself, or devout Catholic, but I do think things like that really do make him distinct from, say, other figures in the revolution.
I mean, I just see it very clearly as a cynical optics move, and it's in a long line of cynical optics moves that Napoleon is perfectly willing to carry out. Again, he faked illness just to not have to go and fight in the Vendée, because he knew how grisly it was, and how much it would completely ruin his domestic political chances. And he always seems to move with an eye on that as he's sort of carrying out almost anything.
It does seem like legitimacy is an important thing that he's trying to get to eventually. Is sort of if he can get through the revolution unscathed, or at least in most people's minds, maybe, in order to rise to power. But also, we talked about the sort of the Republican way of doing government. I mean, the directorate was pretty. Would it be considered autocratic? The directory.
Yeah, I mean, they
Yeah.
tried during the early stages of the Thermidorian reaction. They tried to do the honest version of what they'd been preaching all this time, and they found that the people actually hated their ideas and wanted the king back, and that was unacceptable. So they couped their own government.
I mean, also, correct me if I'm wrong, Rupert, but this was like the first attempt to standardize and centralize like a French identity for the whole of France. And I mean, that did continue under Napoleon as well. There was sort of a more central, just centralized French identity.
Yeah, like liberal nationalism.
Yeah, French nationalism that would ultimately come from that.
Yeah. I mean, 3 ideologies that come out of the revolution, at least it seemed to me, liberalism and socialism in its sort of infant stage, I guess, and nationalism. And Napoleon kind of uses them at his whim. He takes what he needs at the time, and then uses what is necessary, and then force.
Well, nationalism is still relatively in its early days at this point, I believe. So it's not until I want to say the 1880s that you really get the proper cultural homogenization going in full force in France. So before then, it's more just like a claim. So they're just claiming to speak for the whole French nation. But that in itself is something of a like a revolutionary idea, because up until that point, you had all the various regional parlements that could make claims to like more regional representation. So there was a parlement in Brittany that would represent Bretons as distinct from other areas like Normandy.
Yeah, sort of the globalization element, or sort of the sort of making everything uniform is part of the revolution. There's and this goes all the way to Louisiana, which is under the Napoleonic Code, and I think still is relatively to some degree ruled by the Napoleonic Code today. This universalist way of doing things is sort of an embodiment of the revolution that Napoleon then spreads all across Europe through war.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm getting at, is that the wholesale rewriting of the of law, of the legal codes, basically is something that the Jacobins were obviously very interested in. They wanted to remake basically everything along rational lines, and so when it's Napoleon that ultimately gets that through successfully, he is purely operating in the exact same continuum as Robespierre. It's just that he's doing it in a way that is much more cynically savvy, like cynically politically savvy.
Yeah. AI, anything?
I mean, he isn't. Robespierre, I would say, is the ultimate utopian, and Napoleon isn't. I don't think Napoleon has like a sort of his vision was more. What I'd say, vision was grounded in reality. I think Robespierre's wasn't, and that I think that's why probably Napoleon was more. It was successful with his reforms, Napoleonic Code, and yeah.
Well, by the time you get to the Committee of Public Safety and the Terror and all that kind of time, you could probably make a slightly more, I guess, materialist argument that the main constituency that Robespierre was trying to tap into, as in like petty bourgeois, like lawyers, like small shopkeepers, and a lot of those types of you might say middle class type liberals. A lot of those guys, and even the sort of like poorer civilians and the sans-culottes and all those, they are nowhere near as much of a powerful constituency, and not anywhere near as uniformly behind Robespierre and the Republican project anymore as they had been right at the very start, because the divisions have already started to open up. And then by the time you get to 13 Vendémiaire, that's when the sharper divide between like what the civilian world thinks and what the army thinks becomes even more in focus, because by that point the civilian world has pretty much left the Jacobins and left the Republicans, the hardest edge of the revolution behind, and they are now looking back towards royalism and sort of like wanting to go back down that route very clearly, and that goes both above and below. So what you have left is the most solidly Jacobin entity left, the most solidly revolutionary entity left is just the army. So in that sense, the fact that Napoleon is, de facto the representative of the army makes him the only one with a proper and, as it happens, very politically powerful pro-republic entity left. And so he's the, basically the only person who could realistically put the Jacobins back. Because when you get to the Directory, they're just having to basically collapse the capacity of the French state more and more over time. And so I guess ironically, the way that it's put in the trailer is perhaps opposite of the truth, where Napoleon is not the one who is protecting France and trying to stabilize order. He's the one who is trying to bolster the disorder and trying to bring the Republican and Jacobin and like part of the revolution back into power and try to solidify it against the organic France that's trying to make a comeback.
Mm.
Oh, Connor, you're muted.
Oh, yeah, I think you're muted.
My bad. The use of the military is quite interesting, especially for our modern day, because I don't think, at least in the liberal mindset, people aren't meant to think of the military as a political force or anything like that. But it's not entirely true, because people manipulate the military into whatever they need it to be at the time. But yeah,
I think outside of the Western context, it's perfectly acceptable to think of the military as a political faction that has its own distinct aims and desires. So I think, for example, in the Ukraine war, for example, there's been all sorts of talk, pretty much all the way through, about the idea of some kind of like coup, or either from the is it the FSB? I think the Russian Secret Service, or via the army to remove the current government from power. But if you were to make the same kind of suggestion in like any kind of Western context, then it would probably be a lot more unthinkable.
Isn't that come up in France discussions? Haven't the sort of the former generals threatened something recently?
Yeah,
that recently,
I don't. Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, from my understanding, that's kind of like a sort of like a boomer fantasy. If I'm absolutely honest, I don't know if that's because again, a lot of it's former generals. I would say a good example actually is if you remember the Egyptian revolution, when Hosni Mubarak was removed. You then had like your liberal side, like pro-Western revolutionary types, and then you had the Muslim Brotherhood, and you had basically the two factions at each other's, and the Muslim Brotherhood won the elections, and they had I can't remember the name of their president who came in, but their guy was in, and then suddenly, because it was seen as too extreme for elements of the Egyptian military and the code, that there was a coup where they just overthrew and removed the Muslim Brotherhood, and I think they outright banned it. Yeah, I mean that's something I would look as a comparison, because and I believe the Egyptian military, that their sort of reason was we're doing this to save the revolution. They said, well, these we've got enemies of the revolution in every corner trying to stop it. We're here to save the revolution. So yeah.
Interesting. Now, an interesting thing, I don't know if you guys picked up on this, or if you think there's something to this in the trailer, but it seems that Josephine is going to be portrayed as more of a powerhouse, at least in like behind him. I don't know if that's true. Is that how she would have played into the situation?
Not to my knowledge.
Mm,
In fact,
no,
from what I know, it's not true at all. Basically, it's just kind of in line with current political sentiments.
yeah, female, strong female boss. No, I mean, in reality, her husband was executed during the reign of terror. She was imprisoned, I believe, as well, but released. So yeah, I don't think there was any major significant sway she had at the time. Not till probably later, but yeah, initially no, no, and I also wasn't she a bit promiscuous as well? You know, she sort of got around the.
I think so. When Napoleon was away, I thought, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, they both had affairs, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you could argue more that he saved her from the death, right? Or at least imprisonment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much because Napoleon was friends with Robespierre's brother. Was it Augustine? Is that who I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was friends with that, and friends with, and he was very much, and of course he was leading up the Jacobin. He was very much leading up the Jacobin club in Corsica. So he was, he was a, yeah. I mean, he would have been a safe guy to be around for her, because yeah, he was, he would he was, and he was quite untouchable. I mean, when you actually read about some of like the he, how how he just sort of wandered in back to barracks after being away, largely without leave, and how he got away with. I think on one occasion he just said, well, 'cause he brought his younger brother Louis with him, and he just said, in one sort of correspondence, he said, well, I was late by like 3 months because of the weather or something. And then in the final one, he was told to be back. I think it was like February 1793, and he was late for that, but nothing happened. Nothing happened to him. So yeah, in the normal circumstances, he would have been, I guess, classed as a deserter. But yeah, I mean, he got away with a lot. Definitely.
Now doesn't she berate him during the trailer? Make like I don't know, does she call him small? I can't remember exactly. Isn't there a weird part where that happens?
Yeah, implying that he's nothing without her.
Yeah, so I don't
Yeah.
get that. I don't see how there's any connection
I
between reality and that.
The only thing I can think of, and because she had links to the old French aristocracy through marriage, because her husband was Viscount, or Rupert. What was her husband? Viscount Bu, Beaumont.
I'm not entirely sure. I don't recall, but I mean that wouldn't make him.
I think
much.
Let me have a look. A sec.
Viscount of I can't pronounce French words.
Yeah, because she was connected to the old aristocracy. I think they're trying to get. I think they'll try to get out in this film. Napoleon is basically a lesser noble. She's a proper French noble, and he's not in the same standing as her. So I think that's what they get. So that's where the idea of, well, she's elevating him up to sort of the French aristocratic aristocracy. But in reality, given the revolution, that whole system just didn't exist. It just didn't matter. It just didn't matter at all, because they weren't the ruling elite. The Jacobins were at that moment in time were the people calling the shots. So I mean, it doesn't really matter.
And I mean, to take that even further, the Jacobins themselves were, especially under Napoleon, but I guess this is a bit later. But the Jacobins were very busily ennobling themselves. So a good portion of the entire Jacobin club, if they survived through the whole thing, then especially the leadership all end up in as dukes, viscounts, and
yeah,
counts.
indeed, yeah.
But she wasn't a high noble by birth.
No,
was
I
she?
think she was. I think she was less than nobility. I think she. I don't. I think she was from a landed family, but I think it was like account level. I don't think she was. She wasn't like from a. From the equivalent of her first husband. No, I don't believe so.
Do you think they're going to deal with the fact that she was put aside by him?
Yes. Yes, I think they will.
How do you think they're going to portray that?
I think. Oh, I mean, the cynical part of me says that they're going to portray him as like a misogynist who can't handle a strong, independent woman. To be honest, I think that's my gut reaction. How they're going to go with it. But Ridley Scott may go for the fact that she was promiscuous and she wasn't loyal and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. Maybe she might be a villain in the film. I can't.
One ironic thing that doesn't come across here is that actually Josephine was older than Napoleon, and I was going to mention that in general, but Napoleon, throughout most of the events that are being depicted in the trailer, was really quite young, like early 20s.
I think he was 24 in this particular meeting, if I remember correctly. I think he was 24.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Josephine would have been about 30.
Yeah.
Whereas here you got things reversed, where she looks much younger than him, and he looks pretty old throughout.
Yes, and he became. I think she says in the trailer what you oh no hold in this particular point he's sort of, I wouldn't say he's known within circles in France after the siege of Toulon, and so I think this takes place after the siege of Toulon, and probably when he's a brigadier general in Nice. I'm just guessing at this point. I really don't know, but
I don't remember what rank he would have been at the time. But yeah, in this scene, he does mention that he retook Toulon. So yeah, we're back to that.
Yeah, and thing though is that was the thing though is the siege of Toulon would have been spread, the news of it would have spread around France, because he they managed to recapture what was it was called, I think it was called like Little Gibraltar. It was this fortification on the cliffside above Toulon, which was keeping the protecting the French and royalist and ships from and keeping the French ships away. And of course Napoleon led a charge on the fort, was wounded in the charge by a British sergeant. I think he was either shot or bayoneted in the leg or something like that. He managed to recapture it, and it I think it was one of those few victories where it was you could say was a genuine sort of win for France, and so it was an important point. It was definitely important for him, and because afterwards he would have his promotion. I think he was given brigadier general afterwards.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was after that or just before that he was given charge of defending the Tuileries Palace to protect the convention, which is obviously when the events of
I think it was afterwards, because before Toulon, his family were left Corsica, so they were kind of with him at that time. His mother and siblings. So
yeah, I don't remember the exact order, but either way, he received a pretty significant posting afterwards, whether that be protecting the government itself or being charged with the leadership of the Italian campaign. The Italian campaign, basically.
Yeah.
Either way, it becomes a very big political thing for him. So yeah, pretty important in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, Toulon was a very important battle for it. I mean, well, it was it's what propelled him to a national recognition. I would say the start of a national recognition name.
Yeah. Do you think his coordination is done well, just from what this shows?
I mean, I think it's Lincoln Cathedral, by the looks of it. It looks like because I've been there, so it looks like Lincoln Cathedral.
It's they're not even using a French cathedral.
I mean, to be fair,
what?
I suspect it would have been a lot more colourful. That's the only thing that comes to mind.
Yeah,
I've seen depictions, but I can't think exactly what it looked like now.
Would it be Notre Dame, de Paris, or Reims, or where did he get coronated?
Notre Dame. Notre Dame.
Which
I
one?
didn't think it was Reims.
Paris.
Yeah.
Paris. Okay.
So
So I guess maybe they couldn't film it there.
Oh yeah, because of the fire. Yeah,
presumably.
But there must be something that would have been closer to a depiction of it.
Yeah. I mean, they could have. I mean, I said, me here sitting here, we could have done CG or something. But yeah. The thing there is, I will ask Rupert this because he may know. Was Notre Dame still damaged at that time during his coronation, or because I know it was used as like wasn't it like used to like store like hay, and it was during the just after the revolution, it was like repurposed. So and
the actual coronation itself took place a bit later, I believe. So I'm not sure specifically, but I imagine it would have been. They would have had plenty of time to get it back in order.
Yeah, that's yeah.
It's interesting, just sort of if you're getting Notre Dame back in order for a coronation, it sort of shows how, like, I imagine it also would have been along with a mass, or maybe not, I guess, but just that it the desire to return to something, at least for public.
It's all facade. That's the thing.
Yeah. I think, going back to what you said, Connor, that this particular event, it was very much in the I mean, it was very much in the sense it was a French ceremony. It was a Catholic and an imperial ceremony, and it was ultimately about legitimacy. This was his way to legitimize, the regalia and everything. I believe it's quite accurate in the sense it was to, he was to be depicted as like a I mean, almost like a Charlemagne figure in some ways. And he did have there was inspiration. I believe he had great inspiration from Charlemagne. I don't know.
I believe I believe the crown was a replica of Charlemagne's.
Yeah,
he had the laurel wreath, which is obviously calling back to Rome, and supposed to be a symbol of piety, I believe. God, being favored by the gods originally, but I think later on it took more secular connotations of being just great and virtuous and all that kind of thing. So I don't really know specifically what he was trying to call back to. Presumably not piety, but that's what it originally meant. And then obviously he had the replica of Charlemagne's throne, but Charlemagne's crown. But in both cases, they implicitly carry a almost like a land claim or like a succession claim from one of those great European empires. So I suppose you could interpret it in a way that he's, by using those crowns, laying claim to pretty much anything in Europe that he wants.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
also like if you compare it to like him on military campaign, he's very much the opposite of this this majesty. He's do people call has he been called frumpy? I feel like I've heard that. He's very much he uses the regalia as a symbol, but barely anything else.
Yes. I
Now,
don't think I don't think he wears it ever again after his coronation, or anything close to that. I
yeah.
mean, he doesn't like wear it on on campaign. I don't believe.
Well, yeah, he wouldn't do it on kid, but it just I mean, he dress like sort of a lesser general than he is?
Um, yeah, I mean, a lot of the art depicted, he's wearing either like his uniform is out in the open, or he's wearing like like a coat, as you see here. Um, I'm not particularly sure, to be honest. I think he would largely wear. If I remember correctly, I remember. I don't know if it can. I think he wears like it was like it was similar to a corporal's uniform. I don't know if that or a lieutenant's uniform. I don't know if that's true, Rupert. That may be something that's inaccurate, but yeah,
I must admit, I'm not sure either.
I remember reading something about his uniform was like similar to that of his early years in the artillery, or something like that. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the famous sort of hat and everything that you see present. I mean, that's of course that's sort of a universal symbol of Napoleon, isn't it? Really, at this point.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
think at least on an Apostolic Majesty stream, he talks about how the Napoleon is dressing substantially down compared to the other marshals, the other generals of his army. So it's just interesting that he goes for all the regalia, all the imperial symbols when he's coronated, and then sort of he really does. He's not interested in keeping a imperial, I don't know, dress code or something like that up for
Mm.
much longer. Now,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I was just going to say that does remind me a bit of Alexander, because one that Alexander the Great, he was very much similar to that. He's very much he was he would just wear the armor that of uh that of his army. It wasn't so much again similar sort of, and of course Napoleon took great inspiration from Alexander, um and Caesar, as we know. So um yeah,
Although there is also the angle. Sorry, finish your point. Sorry.
No, I have finished. Don't worry, I finished now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, as I mentioned earlier, especially as you get sort of later into the Napoleonic era, and like a little bit more beyond the chaos of the convention and the directory, then you have like a much more definite divide between where the Jacobin sympathies lie. So you have the people who in civilian France who are much more leaning towards monarchy again, and have been for quite a while by the time of his coronation. And then among the army, they are much more Republican, much more Jacobin oriented, Republican in nature and disposition. So it would kind of make sense politically from that standpoint as well, to not mark yourself out as being too distinct or too regal amongst people who are more Republican, and conversely to make yourself look more grandiose and regal among people who are kind of looking for that.
Yeah. This so in this campaign, I think it's supposed to be Austerlitz.
Austerlitz, yeah.
Yeah. The the shooting cannonballs into the ice, and all these people drown. I've heard conflicting things. I've read conflicting things about this. Is that some sources say that, or sort of the common sources at the time say that it was massive and that a lot of people died, and then from sort of people like going to the battlefield and doing research there, that there probably wasn't a lot of people that died from the sort of the ice, the sort of battle on the ice.
It's a morale thing as well, of course, and that's at this point the greater factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're using it more sort of symbolically. I mean, I think it's also just in this trailer they want to use it as an awe factor.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because it's an interesting propaganda tale. It's a battle on the ice, symbolizes the sort of ice cold expression on Napoleon's face. There's you got that connection. One thing I would say actually, and the film Waterloo demonstrates this perfectly, and there's a lot of films at this time where you don't really see it a lot, but and World War One is also the classic example where they don't show officers leading the columns or officers leading a charge or officers. They're usually 1917. That film is the worst when it comes to it. You just see men randomly charging about, and in this one, I think there's a chap with a sword close to the front in this image there on the right. So I'm hoping in this that there is like I'm hoping that you have in the battle scenes you do see officers leading the columns, coordinating, and seeing like in the battle scenes that there is like a resemblance of order on the battlefield itself, and it isn't just like bunch of men just charging about aimlessly with no sort of I mean, you got the standards of that cavalry there. Yeah,
It's definitely.
But conversely, they seem to have Napoleon himself leading leading a cavalry charge, which to my knowledge I don't think he ever actually did.
No. I think there were two. I said actually on Duke's stream last night, we were talking about it, and I said, well, I know he led the charge at Toulon, but that was on foot. Apparently, there was another one in Italy.
Yes, I was just thinking that. He personally
crossed the bridge.
rallied.
But again, that was on foot as well because Napoleon wasn't a very good horse rider. That was the other thing. He wasn't a good horse rider at all, and that was also quite well documented because he never. I mean, he learnt. I think the first time he went on a horse when he went to school Brienne in France, when at the age of 10. So horses weren't common on Corsica. It wasn't a common feature in life. But most people in Europe never really never had the chance to go on a horse really. So it's yeah.
Interesting. So a bit of propaganda, and maybe just false. Now, but what's going on with the British in this? Like, they have this one part where we see a British commander, maybe I don't know who it's supposed to be, just talking.
Is it George the Fourth?
Oh, never mind. Is the king? I don't know.
Well, the Regency.
Oh yeah,
the Regent.
The Regent King.
The Regent, yeah. I think I don't know if it's meant to be Wellington. I don't think it's Wellington. It doesn't. Again, the medals and the uniform doesn't really match. So I think it's George the Fourth.
He's also too old looking.
Yeah, I was thinking he looks a bit old for that. So might be someone else.
But then again, Napoleon's also too old.
Well, yeah. Maybe they're just gonna make everyone too old except the women.
Well, it's funny. This is kind of off, but like it seems that there aren't very good young actors that can play these roles, so they always go to like older actors that have much more experience.
I tell you, do you know what's triggering me at the moment is some of his medals are a bit off. Again, that would not be suitable in the military.
Well, I mean, especially for the king, if this is the king.
Yeah, the medals are a bit off. Yeah,
But so what role is the British going to play in the story? Also, how far are they going to go in his story? Are they going to get to Waterloo, or are they going to end before the Russian campaign? Like, it just seems this movie doesn't really. I don't really feel like it gives us any idea of where it's going to end up.
I
It
think
does.
because
It does.
It does seem as though they're going to try and go for his whole career, which might be a little bit too thinly spread to actually delve into anything in any great depth. So it might just be sort of like a surface whistle stop tour over his over the major events of his career. Probably even missing out some major things, I would imagine.
I have a theory. I think they're going to start the film when he's on Saint Helena, and it's just going to go like back in time to key moments. I think that's personally how I think it's gonna go down. But
I guess if they do that, then it would justify him being old. If they are just going to portray it all as a memory, they could justify him being old at every stage because he's placing himself as he currently is back in time.
Yeah, that would be a good rationalization. Maybe you should be directing the movie, Rupert. I don't know if they're clever enough for that, but
actually, on that idea, I just thought, wouldn't it be great if you have like old Napoleon, like when he's meant to be 23, when he's meeting Josephine at the party, and you see old like Joaquin Phoenix, and he's looking in the mirror, and you see like a very young, historically accurate looking Napoleon looking back at him in the memory. So it's so yeah, something like that. That yeah, he's put older like old Napoleon himself in that, and but everyone sees younger Napoleon. Something like, I don't know.
yeah, that'd be interesting. I don't know if they're going to do that. I feel like they're just going to be like, nope, we have old Napoleon. What who cares about the reality?
Yeah, this is just how it is. Don't question it.
Exactly. Well, that's how they are with everything these days, anyways. So, at least they didn't make Napoleon black or something. That's
you never know. That might be for the remake.
A remake, only like 5 years from now.
One of his marshals is Algerian, the actor is Algerian, Arab Algerian. I mean,
oh yeah, where what part of the trailer is that?
No, in the casting, I wanted to do looking at the casting. I mean, there were a few black background characters in there, so
there was another half Haitian general, I think, wasn't there, or fully Haitian? I can't remember which.
Yeah. So yeah.
So they're getting in their diversity as well.
Well, I said last night on Iron Duke stream that if they just have like black characters and Arabs and Berbers and all sorts in there, it takes away from the story of Napoleon, because Napoleon's meant to be this, because he is like a foreigner. He's a different ethnicity. He's effectively he's in their mind a Corsican Italian, and he's around France, and so he's meant to be in his early life, particularly. He's the person out of place there around other French people, and he was. But if you have all these different like multi-ethnic stuff, it completely changes and it doesn't accurately portray his story and his struggle and his and why up until his 20s he had deep resentment of the French. I mean,
I'm pretty sure that carried on throughout his life, because considering how many Frenchmen died under his command, I think he'd probably feel a little bit more remorse about it if he was actually French himself.
That's funny.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, he did. I think. Yeah. I mean, I think he had greater love for the Rhineland, the Confederation of the Rhineland, and but true. I mean, but my point is though, I think if there was you're going to have endless diversity like characters here, there, and everywhere. The story is Napoleon's not in the early life of this. Well, Napoleon's not French. The French people know he's not French, and there was actually a great I was reading one of the books earlier, and it talks about how the French that when he was went to military school, there was this assumption because he was Italian that he was a natural Machiavellian, flamboyant Italian, the sort of stereotype, the sort of skullduggery, intrigue sort of character, and so there was very much this sort of idea put on him, and then of course he had like
and I should say he did absolutely nothing to prove them wrong.
Yeah, he had this he had this nickname, and they made fun of his Corsican accent, and also, I mean, his spelling, some of the French letters where he's writing in French, I mean, some of his, even into adulthood, some of the spelling was quite appalling and full of grammatical errors. So yeah.
It's interesting that you could have that sort of contrast, but it does sort of undermine the contrast if, you know, sort of everyone is from anywhere in the movie. Like, it doesn't really matter. Though I think that's kind of sort of liberalism just naturally peeking its way, you know, trying just being hidden in the, or not even hidden, just in the background. Ridley Scott has had many historical films, and you know this, you know, I mean, people would argue that's the what was the movie? What was it? The Kingdom of Heaven. You know, like one of those movies like that. That was poorly done, at least from sort of a mentality of the people of the time. It's very modern in its style, though. I would think that Ridley Scott would do a little better with Napoleon being more of a modern character, at least.
Well, he does know better. He does know better. There was a film, I don't know if you guys see it, it's called The Duelist, and it's these two French officers who end up going through their entire, like the events of the Napoleonic conflicts and the War of the Coalitions, and they end up dueling each other, and it is quite the way that the characters are depicted and their clothing and style and everything is quite accurate. So I think Ridley Scott does know better. I just think he's I just think he's, you know, he gives in to you know, and we hear this all the time. Well, historically accurate films and the historical authentic films can't be done, but look at Northman. I mean, that is, I have to say, I have watched Northman recently. That is quite accurate to I would say the society that existed at the time. And but the argument is, well, if you do films set, you know, what, like 1,000 years or a couple hundred years, modern audiences can't relate, so we have to have like these modern liberal values and modern, and like, you know, strong woman here and everything injected into it. But you know, audiences can relate. They can relate to story. They can relate to how, you know, characters, you know, on an emotional level. And so I don't buy. I just honestly, I do not buy this. I don't buy this at all. You know, people can relate to these stories and to these characters, and they do. I mean, why, you know, it's why people still, you know, love you know, reading accounts by, you know, someone like Alfred the Great, or you know, Charlemagne, or Martel. I mean, or Alexander the Great, or Caesar, or Pompey, or whoever. You know, you can relate to it. It's all relatable. It's just I to be honest, I think I think it's Hollywood, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that it would take a lot more work to actually be able to fully immerse yourself in all the different aspects of the setting. So I can't remember who made Northman, but they've spent a lot of time, as I recall, exploring different aspects of pagan thought and like some of the mythology around it. And so they built up a strong, not only like personal working knowledge about all those kinds of things, but also how to portray them on the screen. And so Northman is kind of what you get at the end of those 3 or 4 films or whatever it was that have been exploring these same kinds of topics, when there's a much more fleshed out understanding of it. So in order to be able to do the same for, say, you know, Alexander the Great, then you'd have to be able to go into all the different mythology and all of the understanding and the worldview around how the Hellenes would have thought at that time, which is very difficult to do. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, they don't want to do work.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's inconvenient for many writers to do the actual work.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a shame because if they did, it would you would have like epic. What is it that what Martin Scorsese says? Cinema. This is true cinema. I mean, if you were to create if I was given the chance, I could create like a trilogy of Napoleon, like full on epic, breathtaking epic and everything. And but again, yeah, it just wouldn't be feasible. Probably for Hollywood, it wouldn't be feasible.
well, if Peter Jackson can kind of do that with Lord of the Rings, I think somebody should be able to do that with legitimate history.
I do think in Hollywood, I think like the George Lucas's, the Peter Jacksons, that sort of indie directors, like people who have a passion and do their own thing and basically don't really listen to what the studios want. I don't think those directors have unfortunately exist anymore. I think like with streaming services and production, the way production companies work and everything, I think that sort of it's incredibly difficult to do, near impossible. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Peter Jackson was able to do it.
Exactly.
I'm just trying.
Well,
I'm just trying. I was just trying to think. I was just trying to think. I mean, like the film Waterloo. I mean, that was. I think that was excellently done, like especially the battle scenes. But I think that was done. Was that done by like a Soviet filmmaker or something like that?
I don't know. I don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, no, it's interesting. And do you think Napoleon's going to be portrayed positively, like as a sort of a heroic figure, or a tyrant? Like, because they sort of they're trying. It's almost like they're trying to be balanced, but you can't do that really in a movie like this, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to go down both routes, and they seem to fairly explicitly make that point in the in the trailer. But it very much does. Sorry.
How do you do both? I mean, like, so I don't know.
Well, there was a clip going round. I think it was the anniversary of Napoleon's death, and Macron was at Napoleon's tomb and giving a service and everything and speech there, and his because in France today the way French people view Napoleon is kind of, obviously people on the right and everything tend to be more favourable. I know there are other monarchists and everything on the right who view him in a very different light, but there's the modern left, of course, view him as a tyrant and baddie and all that sort of stuff. I mean, the Macron took the position of, well, we're going to liberate. I think he said we're going to liberate the good qualities of Napoleon and internalize that, and then we're going to accept the bad qualities of Napoleon. And that was quite interesting. And so I wonder if that's like how they're going to. We're just going to amplify the good stuff that Napoleon did, or what we like of the emperor. Like I think Macron said we're going to liberate the emperor, and we're going to liberate him and accept him for what he did wrong, but we're going to liberate him and internalize what was good about him, which I thought was a very bizarre speech, and it was something when I saw the trailer, I was thinking about, because I mean, how many people died in the Napoleonic Wars? Was that 6 million, something like that? 3 to 6 million?
I don't know.
I don't remember the exact number. I'd have to look it up, but I remember it was enough that France started off being the second most populous country in Europe, behind Russia, and only marginally, and it never got back anywhere near the population dominance that it once had. So it was enough to basically permanently demographically disfigure France, and they've never recovered from it.
Yeah, because I never thought about the demographic stuff. Yeah, that's crazy. So after sort of discussing this trailer, sort of wrapping it up, have your thoughts about sort of your interest in the movie changed at all? Is it more appealing? Is it less appealing? What do you think, Rupert?
Well, having talked about how they are perhaps planning to straddle the line between him being, a great man or a tyrant, I still very much lean on the idea that they are probably going to be trying to glorify him a little bit more. But I just don't necessarily see them going too far into depth about what he represented and who he liked to rub shoulders with and how he got his start, and who patronized him and what are all the implications of that. Kudos if they actually do go down that route, but I don't see it happening, not least because it's not written into the histories so much generally, as far as I can tell. So he gets sort of portrayed as this third sensible option between the two extremes that are otherwise both unsuitable for France. But Napoleon comes along to be the very sensible, upright middleman who's going to be the statesman to mediate everything, and that's just not true. So we'll see.
Yeah.
See how they portray the politics.
I agree with Rupert. I think he's going to be portrayed as like the sensible centrist kind of guy. I think you're going to see the you're going to what was it they call it, the anti-hero sort of thing. I think they might play on that a bit. That he's going to be saying, well, I'm always going to try and do good. One thing I would like to see is, number one, how it's represented him leaving his troops in Alexandria in Egypt. And also the retreat from Moscow, where he sort of pulled a similar thing as well. He left the troops and everything. So I'd like to see how that is sort of presented. If they do go after if the film actually does criticize Napoleon on that, and actually show his early relationship with the Jacobins and how he was quite involved with all that, I would be surprised, and I'd be very pleased, because I think that would be a very because it might actually show the character, the man himself, Napoleon, and his what motivates him. I think if they don't include stuff like that, I think I think the audience would be asking more questions than anything else from it. I don't think they would really. I don't think the film would hit right, because it wouldn't really. There will be certain things in there that that wouldn't really make sense. But overall, I'll probably I don't think I'll see it in cinema, but when it comes out eventually on, I think it's Apple TV or something like that, it's coming out on, I'll probably watch it somehow and see what it's like. But I'm not optimistic for it, to be honest. But we shall see.
Yeah, it's definitely a skeptical thing to it's very hard for them to make an adequate historical film these days. So I'm also not very excited necessarily, though it's a shame, because I do think the sort of the design, the cinematography, it seems like it could have been well done, or it could be well done if they really go into the details. But then again, they've set themselves up where they almost can't, because they're doing all of it seemingly at once. Now, AI, you have your conversation. You've been who have you been doing discussions with? I can't remember his name.
Oh, Iron Duke.
No, on your own channel.
Cringe Walker, Nathan Hood, or Cringe Walker?
I think it's Cringe Walker. Your conversation with him about the fall of Rome and sort of that type of thing.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that one. So if anybody's interested, go check that out. Rupert, do you have anything upcoming?
Yeah. So I'm currently just in the process of preparing my next series coming back to YouTube, which is going to be kind of like a typography of different types of monarchy, and exploring the theoretical foundations of monarchy and how different thinkers portray it and understand it. So that'll be coming out in the next few weeks, hopefully. Some of the earlier episodes of that.
Sounds great. That sounds very awesome. I look forward to watching that. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and go to Rupert and AI's channels respectively and subscribe there. Watch their content. They have very good content. So let me know also, anybody in the comments, let me know if you're excited about this Napoleon movie. If you are, if you're not, why not? Okay. Thank you, everyone, and God bless. Bye.